He is a proud Iowan. He is the writer of a new book, which is called Hangin with Winners. It is the great Ray Cole. He is a distinguished television executive and has been for several decades. And we're going to tell his story here on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, also a broadcaster in Olympic sports. Ray, I really appreciate you doing this. First of all, thanks for making the time, man. Looking forward to doing this with you.
I can think of no better way to spend a summer afternoon than with you, Bryan.
Oh, stop it. You were paid, Ray, to say that. In this conversation, we're going to look at your obvious career. We're going to dive into your book. And in that book of yours, Hanging with Winners, which is very inspirational, it has anecdotes with a lot of highly influential people, those who you've worked with, you've connected with over the years. When you're doing an interview for the book, typically, how do you plan for one of those?
Well, if I'm doing a podcast for the V Foundation, for example, that I did recently, they have a great series called Voices for Victory. And I went back and sort of brushed up on my history with the V Foundation, with people like Dick Vitale, and with Dick introduced me to Jim Valvano, and people who serve on that board like Robin Roberts and others. So Chris Fowler, I did his podcast coincidentally separately, which is a terrific podcast called Fowler, Who You Got. And again, I sort of, his approach, his conversation, as he told me in advance, was more about leadership and success and trying to define not so much what it means to be a winner as much as it means to be successful and happy in life. So it depends. I do a lot of speaking engagements. I've spoken to almost 6,000 people in the aggregate since the book dropped, and each one of those engagements are different. I ask the meeting organizers if there's a theme in the book they want me to pick up on, or if they want me to zero in on some of the different winning qualities and traits and attributes, characteristics that are identified by the people we interviewed in the book. And they vary widely, Bryan. So it's sort of all over the spectrum in terms of what I touch on, whether it's in an interview like this or whether it's in a speaking engagement.
How does looking and reading that book, Ray, give me a look into your soul, a look into who you really are?
Well, that's interesting, Bryan, because with my writing partner, Rob Gray, I went to great lengths not to have the book be about me so much as it was intended to be about the myriad winners that I've been blessed to cross paths with during the course of my 45-year broadcasting career, and to hear from them what they think it means to be a winner. Some of them were put off with the notion of what it means to be a winner. I remember Diane Sawyer in particular, she doesn't think that way, and I mentioned Chris Fowler. He didn't care for the word winner, mostly because it conjures up images of what the opposite of a winner is, which is a loser, which is a word that nobody likes to, that's not a place where people want to go. So I guess what I would say to you is that I didn't set out to look into what I was thinking so much as I was what these people were thinking. There's 32 profiles in the book. We interviewed almost 80 individuals, and there's so much wisdom and what I call nuggets in the profiles, but also in the other parts of the book, the prologue, the epilogue, and elsewhere, that contained some of that wisdom from people who we interviewed but weren't necessarily profiling in the book. So I hope there's a little something for everyone who reads the book. I've gotten good feedback because of the format where you can look at one individual you might want to know more about, and you look at their profile and then you move on and so forth. So we'll see if it measures up. The feedback, as I said, has been good, but I would hope that the diversity of people profiled also is something that attracts readers, because we break it into executives like Bob Iger and George Bodenheimer, who made Disney and ESPN respectively what they are today. The longest chapter too is news journalists, renowned journalists like Barbara Walters, the late Peter Jennings, Ted Koppel, Diane Sawyer, George Stephanopoulos, Robin Roberts. I have a section on White House correspondence. I had the great privilege of spending time getting to know a lot of White House correspondents who worked for ABC News, and I decided to profile just 3 of them, Martha Raddatz, John Carl, and who was the third one? I can't
It'll
even
come to
remember right
you.
now, Brad.
You know
It'll
how it
come
usually
to me,
works.
but
It usually will come to you the second I hit stop on the recording.
well, it'll come to me. It'll come to me when I look in the book here. John Carl, Martha Raddatz, and because he's no longer at ABC, I forgot his name, but it's Jake Tapper.
Oh, of
Who,
course,
as you
yeah.
know, who you know is a very accomplished anchor for CNN these days. But John Carl, Martha Raddatz, Jake Tapper, they rounded out the profiles in chapter 2. In chapter 3, we go into the sports direction. Everybody from Howard Cosell to Dick Vitale and others. The next chapter is entertainers. Again, everyone from Jimmy Kimmel to Michael J. Fox. And then we go to what I call winning organizations, like the V Foundation. In Iowa here, I profile the Variety Children's Charity and others. So the book bounces around a little bit, and I hope that readers find that to be more enjoyable for them.
It bounces around, but at the core, it shows you what highly competitive people can do, that which they can achieve, and the success that can come because of that. I was watching your interview on Good Morning America, and you talked about this, how, at the core, you are a very competitive person, and that has fueled you to the heights in which you have enjoyed and are enjoying in your career. How early would I see you in being competitive? I mean, I'm going back to like you're a child in Iowa. What was the first competition, Ray, you ever won as a kid?
Well, it was probably a junior golf tournament, maybe, but I grew up in a small Northwest Iowa town. My dad had a grocery store. For a small town, we had 3 grocery stores, so I learned competition from the time I started working in my dad's grocery store at age 5, because we had 2 competitors in town, but they were friendly competitors, good competitors. And then through school, I played sports. My kids are all at school now, but they went to one of the largest schools in Iowa because we moved to Des Moines in 1994 and we acquired the ABC station here. So I probably would have been a manager on a team here, but I was able to play sports in a small town. I played football, I played basketball, I played baseball, I played golf. I love telling the story. The book is about people who influence your lives in many ways. One of the winners in my life was an old high school football coach. His name was Larry Wink, and he's passed on. But you know what? Larry was a great inspiration to me, and I'll never forget. I quarterbacked his football team that he coached my senior year of high school, and I led them to a 1-8 record. I'll never forget at the athletic banquet at the end of the year. He said 2 things. He said, "What can I say about Ray Cole and this team?" He said, "They were good losers. Fact is, they were darn near perfect at 1-8." and he also pointed out that I was the only quarterback in the history of the Missouri Valley Conference that when I threw a pass down the field, my receivers had to call for a fair catch. So I learned how to be humbled at an early age too. But I just think, everything else being even, to be serious for a minute, growing up in small town Americana, I think for me at least served me well. I also went to a relatively small college, a Catholic college founded by the Franciscan Order of Nuns years ago. And I would hope that some of the ideals that the Franciscan nuns preach, if you will, rubbed off on me in some ways. And I will tell you this, chapter 7 of my book is titled Lessons Learned. And it's interesting, all these winners from all these diverse backgrounds that I shared with you earlier, all pointed to one overriding factor uh, uh, when it comes to a winning quality or trait, and it was kindness. Kindness, empathy, respect. Um, they viewed that as foundational to whatever it is you want to accomplish in life. And if you have those qualities going for you, you have a better chance of being successful in your career, and more importantly, being happy in your life. And they pointed to many other qualities, curiosity and always bringing your A game is one of those. You have the book, you probably saw that. I love that expression. And the other thing that you read in this book is that so many of these winners that I profiled talk about not only embracing failure, but not just accepting failure is the way I would put it, but embracing adversity. And whether it's Barbara Walters, who had a very rough start in her career, or whether it's Jay Williams, who now does a great job for ESPN, and the adversity that he had to endure that took away his NBA basketball career after just one season playing for the Chicago Bulls. Someone like Bob Woodruff, who just less than 6 weeks after being named to succeed Peter Jennings as the anchor of World News Tonight, was hit by an improvised explosive device, a roadside bomb that almost claimed his life. And it was not weeks, months, but years for him to come back from that adversity. So life is not all about winning. And that is an important tenet of this book. There are times when you feel like you're losing more than winning. And I say in the book, and others say it well for me in the book, and that is that it's those who learn the most from their losses and adjust the quickest that will go on to experience many, many more wins. And that's a really important takeaway from the book.
In judging what it feels like, as you talk about understanding that adversity comes and you have to embrace the idea of not always winning, with someone like yourself that has accomplished so much and is so driven and is competitive, how do you treat yourself and how hard can you be on yourself at times when you understand that it's not always going to go the way you want? Now, you can overcome, but just that notion of not being too hard on yourself, how would you value or evaluate, I should say, that idea towards everything that has been adverse in your life?
Well, again, we talk about it in the book. You start with that self-confidence that's so important. You seek out mentors, and we talk about that in the book. George Bodenheimer, the retired chairman of ESPN, talked about how important it was for him to have a mentor, and then coming full circle, the obligation he felt to serve as mentors to others later in his career. And so to the extent that you have that confidence and you have people around you that you can turn to when you're feeling maybe just a little bit down, and that you've surrounded yourself with good and smart people, which is pretty important, and keeping that optimism that you need, that self-confidence needs to be balanced with optimism, and at the same time maintaining a high measure of gratitude, and being thankful for what you have and not lamenting what you don't have, and keeping perspective throughout those times where things aren't going as well as you might otherwise have liked. And then along the way, never being satisfied. I have a favorite anecdote that we share in the book, and it came from in an interview we did with Anne Sweeney. Anne Sweeney was a longtime executive president of ABC Television Network. She was co-chair of the Disney Media Networks, appointed to that position in 2004. And she told us in the interview about a phone call that she received from Kobe Bryant. and out of the blue. Now, Ann was not a big NBA fan. Obviously, we had NBA as an important franchise on the ABC television network through ESPN, home of the NBA finals, etc. But so she was quite familiar with who Kobe was, but didn't know him. And she gets this phone call. And he says to Ann, paraphrasing the anecdote, I read about you in the Los Angeles Times this morning, and I see that you're stepping down from your role with the Walt Disney Company. And she says, yes, I am. And he said, well, we're at the same stage, perhaps in life, because I just announced that I'm retiring from the NBA. And given that we're at similar crossroads in our careers, maybe we could get together. And so a week later, she's in El Segundo at a coffee shop right across the street from the Lakers practice facility, and Kobe meets her there. And she said it was just a matter of seconds after he sat down that he said to her, good morning. I just have to get right to it. I have to ask you, do you ever get tired of being the most powerful woman in television?
Wow.
And she answered, yes, I do. And let me ask you, do you ever get tired of being Kobe Bryant, the legendary basketball player? And his answer was, yes, I do, because I am so much more. That tells you a lot about the person that Kobe Bryant was. When I talk about never being satisfied, when I speak to groups, especially young people, I use that anecdote. Here's this, what was he, a 5-time NBA champion?
Mm-hmm.
I think he was an 18-time All-Star. And yet here he is conveying to Ann Sweeney in the clearest way possible that he was not satisfied. He had so much more that he wanted to accomplish. And it's just tragic that helicopter crash claimed his life. People may recall that he received an Academy Award. He received an Oscar the last year he was alive, which underscores the extent to which he was moving on from his basketball career and that he was so much more. So there's an awful lot to unpack there, Bryan, but there are so many different things: optimism, gratitude, self-confidence, mentorship, never being satisfied, always bringing your A game, always having that grit and that determination that you need to really work through whatever goals it is that you've set for yourself. And when I speak, and it's actually in the book too, I point to a favorite Chinese proverb of mine that goes something like this: pearls don't lie on the seashore. If you want one, you must dive for it. And that's the common trait that I saw in all of the people that I profiled in this book, and so many others that I had the pleasure of getting to know and work with through the course of my career. They all understood the importance of having a dream, a goal, if you will, of diving in and then bringing the requisite work ethic, drive, determination, and other qualities needed to make that dream or goal happen. I just think that Chinese proverb captures it in the most succinct way possible.
You couldn't have put it better, Ray, because everyone has a dream, but not everyone is willing to, like you said, put in the work, have the determination to see it through. And going back to what you said about Kobe Bryant, and that's what's made him and had made him and makes you so good at what you are doing, in that you're never satisfied. There's always more. But to that point, which lends itself to having this insatiable desire to always achieve more, how do you tap into that energy, but also appreciate what you have done and not lose sight of that?
Well, I think developing and practicing that trait of gratitude falls right in line with that, Bryan. And I just think that it does start, though. The book is full of people that you've heard of and know. I'm going to give you a name of somebody I bet you don't know.
Let's hear
I
it.
wish I regret not having profiled her in the Extraordinary Iowans chapter of my book, because I talk about her in the book, and I wish I would have profiled her. Have you ever heard the name Peggy Whitson?
I don't think I have.
No, probably very few people would have. She's an Iowa native. She's roughly my age. When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, I was at a Boy Scout summer camp. Peggy Whitson crossed the state growing up, same age. She was 13 years old or so, like I was. She watched that moon landing, and she turned to her mother and said, I'm going to do that someday. I'm going to be an astronaut. She went, graduated the top of her class, small school here in Iowa, went to a small college here in Iowa, then moved on to Rice University in Houston, where she got a PhD. And she went on to join the space program, went to NASA, where she became the person who did just what she said she was going to do. She went into space. She holds the record for the most time in space by any American woman. She owns the record for the most time spacewalking. And she came back and was ultimately elevated to the position of NASA's chief astronaut. And she's now retired. She's in her mid to late 60s. And again, I try to tie it all together, what we just talked about. She's the quintessential example of that person who dove in. She had her dream. She dove in a big way, did all the things she had to do to make it happen. And I don't think ever lost her perspective that you're pointing to, of knowing that she had to keep working to be better. She could never be satisfied. And she always had to maintain that important quality of gratitude and being thankful and appreciative for the opportunities she had, and as a NASA chief astronaut, to help others achieve the dream that she had achieved years and decades before.
Realizing that dream, putting it to action, she has done it. You are doing it as well. Ray Cole joins me, Iowa native himself, and of course the author of Hangin with Winners. We're talking about the book here in the Onto Something podcast. I am Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio and also a broadcaster for Olympic events. So you mentioned your upbringing a little bit in your dad's influence. And I would think, as we talk about the qualities that you've discussed that lend themselves to being a high achiever in society, some of them are learned, some of them are genetic. So how much of a genetic attachment to your dad do you take that which you've done as success from him?
Well, I touched on it only briefly in the acknowledgement section of the book, but I do think that, Bryan, I don't know if it's genetic for young children, adolescents, teenagers. I don't know if it's genetic, perhaps, as much as it is the role that parents have as role models. I don't know that it was genetic that I learned the importance of public service and community involvement. And I watched my dad serve on a school board, and I watched my dad be involved with the Lions Club in that small town of Kingsley, Iowa. They had a group called the Kingsley Community Action Club that did really good deeds for people who needed it around town. And they made sure that kids who otherwise might not have had a toy under their tree at Christmas had them. More importantly, they made sure that families that might not have had a good meal on Christmas Day had one, whether it was a ham or a turkey or whatever. And that's what I saw. My mother, the similar way. She was responsible more than anyone else for the building of a new community library when I was in grade school. To watch her be involved in that project and make it happen. We talk a lot today in this time of Hamilton about being in the room where it happens. Well, my parents were. And I think I'm one of 7 kids in my family. And I think in varying degrees, it was instilled in all of us. They believed strongly in the value of an education. And all of us went to college. Many of my brothers and sisters went on and got postgraduate degrees. And so that small town upbringing only carries so far. But I think whether you're a small town, large town, or somewhere in between, I think what you can learn and model from your parents can truly be a thing that makes the difference in your life. And then as you go on, it's, when I'm talking to a young group at a junior achievement camp here in a few weeks, and I've done that for some years. And the line I always use with them, more important than ever with kids today, with whom you assemble, you shall soon resemble. And I believe that it's who you're around, and I include a message anymore, which is, I'm sorry it's necessary, but I talk about kindness with them, but I also take it a step further and I talk about bullying and not allowing themselves or their friends or others to be bullied. And in this age of social media, I have 5 grandkids, and as I look at them, the oldest is 13. He's in Washington, D.C. today on a school trip. And he took a picture in front of the White House the other night and said rather confidently that someday he might be living there 30 years from now. So he has at an early age a passion for politics. I've taken him to presidential debates. And how many 12-year-old kids as he was when I took him to the New Hampshire Democratic debates, how many kids would be interested in that and say, "Dad, Papa, take me to Boston so I can watch that debate." So whatever it is, I think it's important that kids have a passion. Not many are going to have a passion for politics like my grandson, but whatever it is, it can be sports. It can be the arts. It can be any one of a number of things, but to the extent that as parents and grandparents, we can help shape that and support that, and to make sure that they're not a victim of that social media pressure that we just see more and more of in ways that, Bryan, you're a lot younger than me, but it's different. It's different for you than it was for me, and it's different for my grandkids than it was for you. And not in necessarily good ways. And I think that more than ever, we need to develop those qualities. This would be a good time to mention all of the proceeds of my book go to one of 6 charities, what I call 6 winning organizations. 2 of them are national in scope, and the other 4 are very local here in Iowa and in Des Moines. The national ones are the V Foundation, and specifically the Dick Vitale Pediatric Cancer Research Fund that I've proudly supported for a long time. I mentioned at the outset of our interview, I met Dick Vitale in 1989. He introduced me to Jimmy V, and it was so sad to see Jimmy V pass away in 1993. So I've been involved in the V Foundation in different ways ever since 1993, when that foundation was formed, and its formation was announced at the very first ESPYs in 1993. And parenthetically, I have to say quickly, and how good is it that Dick Vitale will be honored next month at this year's ESPYs Awards with the Jimmy V Perseverance Award. How cool is that? So Dick's Pediatric Cancer Research Fund benefits from the sales of my book. The Broadcasters Foundation of America does as well. I have the pleasure of serving on their board. I head up their chair the Angel Committee. We help broadcasters, Bryan, who, for whatever reason, have fallen on hard times through no fault of their own, have fallen on hard times and have acute needs of some kind. And last year alone, we gave out grants totaling almost $2 million to broadcasters who qualified. I'm very proud of that. And then we go to local organizations. And one of those is the Ray Center, named after the late Governor Robert Ray and First Lady Billy Ray, the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center, and their program called Character Counts. And I thought of that because we were just talking about kids and grandkids, what needs to be developed. If we could just get back to the basic pillars of character that organization espouses, which is trustworthiness, responsibility, respect, fairness, caring, and citizenship. 6 pillars. And if we could get kids in schools and communities and companies and other organizations to embrace those 6 pillars, it would be a far better world. Not just a far better country here at home, but a far better world. So they benefit. Blank Children's Hospital, one of the great children's hospitals in this country here in Des Moines, benefits from the book. The Iowa Hall of Pride. And then I mentioned earlier, Variety, the children's charity. They help kids in all of Iowa's 99 counties. For a small rural Midwestern state, believe it or not, we have 99 counties here. And we touch the lives of young people in every one of those 99 counties through Variety, the children's charity.
That book, Hanging with Winners, Ray Cole, you have such a giving heart. And for as much as that book tells the stories of others, it's really neat in this form to tell your story, because as much as you raise up the spirits of those around you, it's cool to see you and what you've done and the stories personally that have shaped you. And I know this was a good part of sort of showing that in our conversation. Ray Cole, I'm Bryan Fenley. Ray, really appreciate you doing this, man. This was so much fun.
Yeah, I just, have been overwhelmed. You set out to write a book like this and not knowing what's going to develop from it. And it's developed my appearances on Good Morning America and The View and the Tamron Hall Show, and then to meet people like you, Bryan, that I probably likely, in fact, would not have ever crossed paths with were it not for this book, and for you learning about it and reaching out to me and setting up this opportunity to just visit about it. I think is just pretty amazing. I want to leave you with one really outstanding definition of winning.
Okay.
And I mentioned earlier, Diane Sawyer was not sure when we pressed her on what it meant to be a winner, because as she said to us, she said, "I'm sorry, I've just never thought that way. You're never going to put the word winner in a resume. It's not going to be found on a bio, okay? But the qualities, attributes, characteristics that embody what it means to be a winner, those do matter." And so after thinking for a while, after being a little put off by the premise of the book and the questioning, this is what she told us. I'm going to read it because I want to get it exactly right. Winning is about the moment when your purpose meets joy, when you feel that you've really delivered on something you care about, where you get to wake up every day and the thing you want to do is the thing you get to do. And then all of that somehow makes the world better.